Quick disclaimer before the video starts, just because I say something you disagree with doesn't make me AI, it just makes you a soft-bellied fanboy. So obviously following the Austrian Grand Prix, everyone was talking about one thing and one thing only: Hülkenberg and Magnussen dragging Haas cars to P6 and P8. All jokes aside, the lap 64 incident absolutely dwarfed some of the big stories and consequential moments that have happened both throughout the race and across the weekend before it. There were thinly veiled hints of driver moves, soul-crushingly disappointing performances, and some pretty clear indications that this season will continue to get wilder and wilder as it goes on, despite our collective fears coming off the back of an era of complete dominance by Red Bull. But beyond all that, there was a third driver who became the victim of Max and Norris's collision, and it left them absolutely nowhere to hide. Want to know why Red Bull are at risk of being in the mud? As the season goes on, more is being asked of them, and on days like the Sunday just gone, they were found lacking. We said in our video yesterday that the lap 64 incident between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen may well have caused some issues for Red Bull to go pretty unnoticed, mainly in regards to Verstappen being let down, who was 7 seconds clear at one point before a slow pit stop, and the team didn't save back the optimum tyre, didn't pull the trigger on the pit stop sooner despite him asking, though obviously there was traffic, and all in all just had a weekend not befitting of the impressive drive that Max had up until the aforementioned pit stop. It was Red Bull's mistakes that made Norris's late charge for the lead possible, and this weekend seems pretty emblematic of Red Bull's season. It doesn't matter if cracks are starting to show and issues are becoming apparent, because Max Verstappen will make the difference and stop questions being asked directly of the team itself, for better, or, like we saw in Austria, for worse. Something that couldn't be saved by a Max distraction, and something cast in a far worse light because of it, was the weekend that his teammate Sergio Perez had. The Mexican driver has had a dismal run of form recently, whether that be due to Q1 exits or a bemusing lack of race pace, and Austria seemed to really be an especially poor weekend. Not only was Checo nearly a whole second away from Verstappen in qualifying, but Oscar Piastri had a time deleted and was still able to qualify ahead of him. Not only that, but Verstappen was leading the field, and after being involved in a collision, driving 2/3 of the track with a puncture, having an extended pit stop due to the damage, and being dealt a 10-second penalty, he still finished 17 seconds ahead of Checo. Add to this the fact that he was scrapping it out in the lower points position with the Haases and Alpines, then you've got a pretty sorry state of affairs. Because of all of this, questions have once again emerged about Checo's future at Red Bull. However, in light of his contract extension with the team, the questions are now more directed towards Red Bull in regards to whether or not they put the pen to paper far too early for Checo. When asked if Red Bull acted too hastily when penning a new contract for Perez, Christian Horner had this to say: Checo's position within the team, what he has contributed to the team, warranted that. But, of course, there's always pressure to perform, and that is irrelevant of contracts, which we're obviously never going to go into the detail of. Checo knows it's a pressure business, and he knows the scrutiny that there is, particularly in a car that's winning a lot of races and performing with the other driver the way it is. So that's Formula 1, and the pressure that naturally exists on any teammate that is under-delivering. The media start asking questions, and it's very easy to lose your head at that. Now, what I've been impressed with Checo over the past 4 years is that whenever the pressure has really been on, and it's on at the moment, he's always been able to bounce back, and he's going to need to dig deep to do that. However, that's kind of the issue. This isn't the first time that Perez has fallen off a cliff at a very similar time of the season. It's also no coincidence that the fall-off that Christian has pinned as starting after Suzuka coincided with the rest of the field closing up behind Red Bull. On a weekend where Max was unable to claim the top spot in a car that is still in the top 2 cars on any given weekend, it's just down to Checo as the number 2 driver to ensure that he is there to pick up the pieces. Instead, it was Russell, in a car that just a few races ago was absolutely nowhere near fighting for podiums and stuck down fighting at the lower end of the points positions. However, as always it would seem, Red Bull gave reasons for Checo's poor performance on Sunday, and while we've heard him bafflingly blame the car previously this season, it seems that there may be more to it this weekend, as Checo revealed. There was a lot of damage on the side pod. I touched a bit with Piastri at turn 4. I don't know if it came from there. It was unfortunate because we had a good start, but from then on, the car was just nowhere, nothing I could do. I was just off balance. Also, with making a mistake on going into the pit lane with the pit limiter, it was just a disaster of a race that started really well. But I think just lacking so much pace out there and lagging around, there was no hope for fighting people again. And while that would be acceptable as a one-off occurrence, that doesn't remove the 1 second deficit on the shortest lap of the calendar, and realistically in that car, Sergio shouldn't have been down in that position in the first place. If the lap 1 incident did lead to lasting damage that ruined his race, then that can explain him not being at the top of the field for this race, but such excuses don't exist for the other races where he is ghosted, and by ghosting, Checo has not only denied Red Bull points in the constructors, but denied Red Bull strategic opportunities at the front of the field, and this is something that Christian Horner, despite how much he's been working to protect his driver, has made apparent that the team is going to need moving forward, especially due to the rest of the field catching up. As he said, "We need Checo in the mix. He knows that and the team knows that. If he's on the back end of the top 8, you lose strategic options, whether you split your strategies and so on. Checo in the first 4 or 5 races this year was fantastic. We just need to get him back into that headspace." It really is unfortunate that Checo once again finds himself in this rut, because he's a driver that every single one of us cheered for back in Sakir, a driver that fought against the tide that threatened his very presence in the sport. The unfortunate reality for him, it seems, to take a great comparison from Josh Revel, is that he is a lot like Giancarlo Fisichella for anyone else who was watching the sport back then. A driver who is, as our favourite Aussie YouTuber says, a great driver in mid cars and a mid driver in great cars. Thank you for that gem, Mr. Revel. The real question that keeps cropping up is why is he there in the first place, whether referencing Austria's P7 or the crash with Magnussen at Monaco, and it's becoming a frustratingly familiar pattern that has cropped up for the past few years at similar times of the season. However, this year it seems different. The aforementioned quote by Horner is the harshest anyone's been about Checo from the Red Bull camp this season. Compare this to the comparatively magmatic quotes that were thrown around about Perez last year following results that weren't all that much better than this year's display. So just what can Perez and Red Bull do? Well, and this is only going to happen if Checo's form continues to sour as the season goes on, we have to remember that F1 contracts have all the robustness of a chocolate teapot. Realistically, if Checo ends up costing Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship and seems to also force Max into more and more high-pressure situations due to his absence at the sharp end of the field, then we can't see the team not taking action. Well, at least we couldn't if it weren't for the fact that the team has been enduring a crisis of identity, losing their edge in regards to brutal driver decisions, as well as taking into consideration the massive flow of cash that Checo brings to the team, which may prove all important in regards to their engine development program. It seems that if any extreme actions were to be taken, such as the termination of Checo's contract, that it would come as a detriment to the team off the track. It's fair to say then that as long as Perez doesn't cause a larger impact while staying at the team than he would if he were to be axed, then his contract will be upheld. If, however, there are more crashes, more underperformances, and more pressure at the top of the field, then it might be the Red Bull are damned if they keep him, damned if they don't. When thinking about it in this light, it makes sense that the V-Carb driver lineup has been kept pretty stagnant, as the last thing that Red Bull or Sergio Perez needs is a young upstart in the sister team which could bring better performances on track but less financial backing. That's the kind of situation that could put an unfathomable amount of pressure on both the team and the driver, as well as potentially worsen Red Bull's image and alienate a fanbase that cares not for the business acumen of the team, or at least doesn't want business decisions to dictate the success of the team on the track.